It's now time for The Journal, WBGU-TV's award-winning public affairs program, with your host, Steve Kendall. This is where your community matters. Local people, local issues.
Hello and welcome to The Journal. I'm Steve Kendall. Beginning in the 1870s, the first immigrants from Poland arrived in the Toledo area. Today they make up 25% of the area's population. In an effort to preserve the heritage and tradition of that community, an initiative is underway to build a Polish cultural center in Toledo's Marina district. We're joined by two members of the Polish Cultural Advisory Board, Tom Sorosiak and Tom Waniewski. We want to welcome both of you to Journal today. Let's talk a little about the immigration of Polish people to Toledo in the 1870s, because it was a very vibrant part of the community and is to this day. And then we can kind of get to the point of now we're talking about preserving all of that heritage and all of that tradition.
Well, I think, as Tom would agree, with a couple Toms here, the fact that the settlement was both on Nebraska Avenue, which is referred to as Kushvans, or on LaGrange Street, the Lagranka area. And the immigrants settled there, and one of the first things they did, because of their strong attachment to the church, the Catholic Church, they built two churches, St. Hedwig's, which unfortunately is there, and St. Anthony's, which is on Nebraska Avenue. But neither serves that purpose any longer for a lot of reasons. But that that's how the communities began.
Right.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of, when we look at the past, and it's one of the reasons about the Culture Center, but when we look at the past, this whole immigration, you know, people, they would get off in from their immigrating countries in New York and kind of traverse west. And some stopped in Buffalo, some stopped in Cleveland, some stopped in Toledo, some moved down to Chicago. But that whole Toledo stop-off, if you will, ended up in two neighborhoods. The two neighborhoods that Tom referred to, Lagranka and Kushvans, were somewhat competitive. You know, even though they're from the same heritage, Polish heritage, that competition was there. But it centered, here's what I like best about when we look at that history. They centered on, or the church was the center of the family, of the community, of the businesses. So people, my father started a butcher shop with his father on LaGrange Street, across the street from St. Hedwig's. And St. Anthony's, same way. You had a lot of small business owners there. And that really, in my opinion, highlighted the strength of family and the culture of the Polish community.
Right, and you had those were actual communities. You know, now the city is like typical cities. Yeah, there are pockets of these heritage sort of communities, but the reality is it's gotten a little more homogenized over time. But they really were communities unto themselves, interacted with the rest of the city, but the culture was there because they spoke, a lot of them still spoke Polish, not a lot of English, probably learning that. So you had communities that were sort of self-contained with all of the things that go along with that.
Yeah, and that's where the cultural, you know, even though they were separate communities, they came with the Polish traditions. They still celebrated Christmas in a certain way, and they celebrated Easter as it was done in Poland. So that brought the homogenous two communities together. And they, you know, as Tom said, they became the mom and pop stores and businesses. And for the people like my dad, who did not have a store, he did what most Polish men did. He went to work for Jeep. And that was the main employer, whether you were basically Polish or maybe Hungarian. And very proud of that. My dad started there in 1928 at the Jeep plant. And so, you know, the communities became vibrant, and the only time they, you know, basically left the community in a lifestyle situation was to go to what we refer to as downtown. They got on the bus, whether it was from Nebraska Avenue or LaGrange Street, and they went downtown, so they go to Titke's or Lion Store or Lamson's. But up until that time, they were self-contained communities relying on Tom's parents, who had that butcher shop or the corner
local,
store,
the neighborhood store.
corner stores.
Yeah,
they lived up above.
Yeah.
I laugh a little bit because everybody's pushing delivery. We deliver, or Uber Treats, or whatever that is. My dad would take half of the day to deliver the groceries to the neighbors. So he had the van and pile in the groceries and was doing that. So he was ahead of his time.
Yeah, we think that's a new thing.
That's
we
right.
think, oh wow, cutting edge. Look at this, all this. And the reality is, it's sort of a revised way back to the old ways, the way the customer service was back then.
They were good memories. I mean, we really. And Tom's very much involved in the Poznań Alliance as well as Polish American Community of Toledo, and there are these 4, 5, 6 groups trying to hold on to some of this heritage. But the reason is because it was such a good time, historically speaking. It's a time that I grew up. It was a great time.
Right.
And that's what's leading into the Cultural Center.
Okay.
Because there's stories there. And
Sure.
we don't want to lose
Right.
those stories. My parents have passed as Tom's, and the end result is now we're relating the stories that we lived or they told
told you
us, and that can't be forgotten. And it more or less resembles what Steven Spielberg did with the Holocaust Museum.
Right.
He says, look, before all these people die, we better get this on tape. We better hear their stories. We're the same way. And people are beginning to contribute to the Polish Cultural Center in, say, artifacts. They'll say, this, my here's this from my grandfather or my grandmother, their papers or something. And that's what's going to go into the Cultural Center, which we'll talk about.
And that's true, because once that's gone, it's gone. You never get it back, whether it's something that actually is written down, recorded, a diary, whatever, or the spoken word, those oral histories, because once the people that lived through that are gone, we're trying to pick up the pieces and kind of reassemble what we think kind of happened, and that's difficult.
And that's a good point, because in Toledo they have the Toledo Polish Genealogical Society, and they meet once a month at St. Michael's. And one of the things the parents or grandparents didn't speak about, they didn't speak a lot about their homeland other than the traditions. And it was passing, you say, well, where did grandpa or grandma come from? Well, they came from Poland. And all of a sudden, well, what town, what city? And the Genealogical Society, through records and archives, are now helping, whether it's my generation, but more importantly, the generation after me now, to find that information out.
Was there a reason why maybe they didn't want to identify an area or a city or a region? Was there anything, or was it just that they'd moved on past that? They were Americans now, or what was the reason for that?
I think probably a little of both.
Okay.
In Poland, you have to remember, Poland didn't have its own identity for many years.
Right.
The Germans invaded, the Czechoslovakians,
the Russians.
That's right. Russians.
Two different sectors.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, but when they did come to America, and you bring up a good point in the sense that, my undergraduate degree, as you know, is in journalism, and the reason it is I credit my mom. My mom made sure that I and my brothers knew how to speak good English, that our grammar was right. They came here and they wanted to acclimate to America.
Right.
It's funny, in the whole immigration debate going on now, it's a little different.
Yeah, we're kind of, and we'll come back. Let's talk about that assimilation and that urge to become more basically American versus old country, and not that there was anything wrong with that, but you're right, there's a different approach to it now. Maybe it's because we're trying to retain some of that heritage. I don't know, we'll see. We'll be back in just a moment here on The Journal. Thank you for staying with us here on The Journal. Our guests are from the Polish Cultural Center Advisory Board. It's Tom Waniewski and Tom Sorosiak, and we were talking a little bit about the fact that in those communities, the Polish community, just like the Hungarian community, all of the different communities, there was an urge to acclimate to America, but at the same time still practice a lot of the old traditions. And blending those two things together and evolving had to be a little bit difficult. Tom, you mentioned the fact that your mother wanted to make sure you spoke correct English.
And she was always correcting our grammar, and no, you don't say this, and you don't put the two negatives together.
Ain't's not a word.
Ain't's not a word. I ain't got none. You know, and she would get on that typewriter. She got a job working billing with Dr. Glow up the street.
Blavatsky, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay.
And so I'd see her on that typewriter. So that's kind of what drove me into my career. But that whole acclimation, I think, was intended to make us to be sure that we're all good Americans. I think my grandparents came from Poland.
Right.
And so the reason they came is because they wanted a good living. They wanted the freedom, get rid of the oppression or flee the oppression. And in order to do that, you needed a good job, and that way you were able to take care of your home, your family, and your neighborhood. And all those dominoes seem to fall into, to me, the perfect life.
Yeah. And the same for me. Yes, you know, my mom, she would always say, don't speak Polish, speak English, because you're going to get that, you're going to retain that accent, and you'll never get a good job.
If you have an accent.
Of course, and I spent a lot of time also with my grandfather, and he wanted me to speak Polish, and the only way I'd be able to go fishing with him is if I spoke Polish. So I wasn't going to give up fishing to Polish.
Well, no matter what. Huh? Yeah.
So I kept the tongue, the Polish tongue.
And I'm convinced that my parents also didn't want us to learn Polish, because whenever they wanted to talk about something,
they want you guys to know what it's about. They can drop into that.
That's right.
Basically, sort of a
But I had a brother that would ask me, because he didn't.
Yeah.
He was older than me, and I understood it. He'd get me offside and say, "What did Mom and Dad have to say?
What did they say about
Pay
me?
me something, I'll tell you."
Well, you know, and it isn't, because again, you know, we talk about those communities, and you mentioned the two of them, those two communities. Why were they separate? Just not to go all the way back to that, but why did they have this sort of competition? What was the reason for that, or was there one, or it just happened that way?
You know, I really, the only thing I can think of, you know, from my side, that immigration came out of Poland. That's why we have a sister city with Poznań, Poland.
Okay.
And from my parents' side, they came from Poznań area, except my dad. But for some reason, he came from the Sednia, which is on the Lithuanian border.
Okay,
but not everybody came through New York. Some came through Milwaukee into Chicago, or Chicago then to Toledo. My mom through New York, but my dad through Pittsburgh. And you know, so I don't know if it was where people found work, and then because you had to have a sponsor. That was one of the things. So if they ended up finding work on Nebraska Avenue for whatever may have been there, and I'm trying to think what was out on Nebraska Avenue, that's would they be sponsored, and they settled in there.
So it just happened.
That would
could have been
by happen chance.
Yeah, just there were a number of variables there. It wasn't like, oh, that's where everybody from one particular region decided. There were a lot of other pieces involved in that.
And I think, Steve, Poles are competitive. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I was talking to someone the other day and was telling them about our venture for the Polish Cultural Center, and they said, boy, he's worked with a couple of Polish people, and they always seem to be arguing. And I said, yeah, we've experienced some of that. And he said, but the one gentleman told him, but that's the way they communicate. So there's nothing, they're not trying to be negative, it's just that competitive nature.
They challenge each other to keep things moving. Now, when you look at some of the things, some of these traditions and heritage you're trying to preserve, and you talked a little bit about the fact that people are giving you artifacts, they're telling you oral histories, that sort of thing. Is there do people know how to get in touch with you guys? I mean, is there a place they can go, a Facebook page, an online page, you could say, hey, here's how you get a hold of us if you want to talk to us, you want to send us something?
Sure, we've put, we've dispersed a lot of communication material. It has Tom's contact information, my contact information, but it's also on our website, polishculturalcenter.org.
Okay.
So we try to get that out. I had a gentleman call me just yesterday, said, hey, I hear the Polish Hall of Fame is going for its second year, how can I find out more? So my phone number is all on that, our addresses are all on that. The best way is, to me, polishculturalcenter.org, because then you don't have to remember everything.
Everything's,
But they can call me at home, they can write me a letter, they can send something to post office box, we've got it all laid out.
And we meet with the other organizations, Polish organizations, or even just an organization that's interested in what we're planning for the Marina District for the location of the Polish Cultural Center.
Now, we'll show this program basically on the 6th of June, and we know that obviously Polish history, World War II, Germany, Russia, trying to carve Poland up. A lot of Toledo Polish Americans obviously fought in World War II and the home front and did all of those things too. Are you getting stories about that part of it, the World War II era? Because that's a generation that's disappearing, really, is disappearing even as we speak. Any stories like that coming out of that?
I think from what I can attribute here to that statement is I've got folks who want to give me. I've got things, so I've got letters that were sent home from Poles to their family. All of my uncles, I think just about all of my uncles on both my parents' side fought in the war or were some part of that.
Right.
But the other thing is we're getting, I had a lady the other day who offered me, there were some patches, medals. So I'm getting bits and pieces of this. My garage is starting to fill up with things. I've had to move some things into the basement, so I don't want them to get, weathered in the garage. So we are hearing some of that. I think what would be a cool thing to do, but we got to walk before or crawl before we can even walk, is we would love to get some of these on video so we're hearing the stories. And we've not quite locked into that. So everything that I've gotten so far, Steve, has been artifacts, pieces like that.
Sure. Because there's obviously stories there, just like there is with any group of people that were involved in that. And we've had veterans on, as we were talking about before we came on the air, that the stories from World War II, the stories from Korea, a different era, a different time, that sort of thing. When we come back, let's talk. We'll kind of drill down into the initiative you guys are talking about. One of the reasons you're here is to talk about the development of this cultural center in Toledo's Marina district. So we'll come back and talk about that on the Journal here in just a moment. Thank you for staying with us on the Journal. And we've got Tom Waniewski and also Tom Sorosiak here. And we've talked a lot about the community, the Polish communities in Toledo. But the main reason that you're here today is to talk about this initiative, which is to develop the Polish Cultural Center in Toledo's Marina district. So we've talked about the reason. We want to make sure you preserve the history, the tradition, the heritage of the Polish communities in Toledo. But let's talk about that initiative, what it means, basically the nuts and bolts of how you're going to get that accomplished.
I'll turn that over to you, Tom.
Okay.
Well, so I'll give you a little thanks, by the way, for turning it over. Now, just a little history. There was the Polish American community of Toledo, one of the Polish organizations in town, wanted to do a community center.
Okay.
And so the community center was initially intended, the thought was to have, the vision was to have a basketball court here, have a chapel in this building. I've done some development work in my career, and so PACT asked me to come and listen to what they wanted and then advise. So the first thing I did was to say I wouldn't make it a community center. There are enough of those around town. The Y, the Boys and Girls Club. A basketball court is very expensive to maintain.
Right.
They're closing churches. Why would we build another church or chapel within this edifice? But what we did find out was that there was this need to preserve the heritage, to have a museum-like setting that could show folks, oh, I remember that from down on La Grinka. I went into Lou's Bar, and the name just escaped me, on the bar on Elm Street. But I've gotten those artifacts now from the bar, and so we would have Polish displays within the cultural center. But it also made better sense for another group, the Genealogical Society that Tom talked about, to then come to a place that they could do their research. Right now, their books are in rusted metal cabinets that are bursting at the seams. They need something that can bring them some stability. So that's how the cultural component came about for this. The other thing was they were looking to raise $100,000 or a couple $100,000. And I said, if you're going to do this right, you really need to ramp that up.
A lot more.
That's right.
Sure.
So our goal is to raise $3 million. And we started to do this. It's all volunteer work that Tom and I are doing. We put together a board to help advise, and we're raising the money through pledges. We just got a matching grant that'll be phenomenal. We're going to approach the state to see if there's cultural facilities monies that we can work in. And then when I talked to the public officials in the city, Councilman Uwagi, at the time, Councilman Steele, they got excited about their heritage. So could this be a catalyst for other ethnicities in that area? There sure is plenty of room.
Sure. Oh,
We've
yeah.
gotten land donated. That was probably the first linchpin in seeing this come reality, because we didn't know whether to build, buy, and remodel. We looked at cultural centers in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Detroit-ish. And so when I talk to people like this, their mouths open like, wow, we didn't know you did this research. Well, we didn't just put the finger up in the air to say, where does the wind going to blow on this?
Right. Yeah.
And so Tom has been phenomenal in helping. He's got more of that history with the organizations. And so that's kind of how this thing started to roll.
Yeah. Well, and you're in the Marina district, which is something that's that's been on the map for a long time. Things are starting to happen there, so it looks like this is another piece of that, getting that rolling, getting more things happening down there as well.
And I think how that came about, Steve, was when David Zank and the Metro Parks were working with ProMedica.
Right.
So I went to Mr. Zank. I said, "Hey, you got some land we can have?" And he said, "Well, we could do this." And then I said, "Well, the building trades was on the southern end of that strip."
Right.
So I went to the building trades. I said, "What are you doing with your old building? Maybe we could tie something in." And Sean Enright, great guy, building trades person, said, "Well, no, we already sold that, but we've got some land here. We'd be happy to donate it to you."
Ah. Wow.
So that's how that came about. He knew that because if we're constructing the building, we're going to use his trades.
Yeah. Right. So everybody wins in that
right.
one. Sure. Sure.
And then that piece of land happened to be right next to city land.
Okay.
So we're in the process of acquiring that at no cost, and we'll have a good 4 acres adjacent to a tribute park whereby we could do the Polish festival.
So it brings all those things. Yeah.
A lot of the dominoes have started to fall, Steve. So that's how that all came about.
And the building, with the name of Cultural Center, has to be a building that is feasible to keep open for the entire year.
Right.
You can't just have a monthly meeting of every organization and pay a heating and air conditioning bill. So the end result is that we're going to have seating for approximately 250 people in an event hall. That's all part of the building. And that event hall will, of course, have a kitchen. And then we're going to have a lounge area so that members can come and have a sandwich and a beverage and maybe watch a soccer game or a football game after a walleye game or something of that nature. Then we'll have our library. Hopefully the Genealogical Society will step in there and meeting rooms. So it's going to be an all-access building. It will be a cultural center with a lot of, we've got a lot of good ideas on how to have this building meet certain ends.
Sure.
We always find that people crave Polish food, but there's not really an established Polish restaurant. There are some good organizations that are making their pierogies. We have the Kielbasa Cook-Off, the PAC does, and it gets a lot of people. But as Tom has pointed out, by having a kitchen and kind of a facility whereby people can come, we would love to do like what the Greeks do on Cherry Street, where one Thursday a week or the second Thursday of the month.
We'll be selling pierogi or gołąbki.
Or having a dinner. Or
Come
a
on in,
lunch.
take out your lunch back to the office or sit down and have it there. And that makes it a feasible facility. And it says to everybody, look, this is how we can pay for the everyday electric and heating and air.
Right.
And Steve, I think, one of the things, so we've talked about LaGrange, we've talked about Nebraska, and so we're building on Front Street.
Okay.
And, I got a Facebook post, Tom, you trader, what are you doing?
Yeah. Why isn't this on LaGrange or Nebraska? Or
but when we looked and did our homework, the organization said they didn't want it in those areas. And that side now, that Front Street, that side of East Toledo, that side of the river, is really booming.
Right.
Cleveland Cliffs going in, the Metro Parks going in, Frank Cass putting his apartments there. Tony Pacos is buying more area to create a Hungarian village. I just think the potential for this, who's ever running WBGU in 50 years will have to go back and say these guys knew what they were talking about.
Sure, and easy access too. That was another thing people wanted.
Good point.
No matter where they were coming from, Rossford, Sylvania, Perrysburg, Toledo, they wanted easy in and easy out. And we have the expressway right there. You can't. You can't.
Well, and I think the other thing is too. You talked about all the other pieces that are around there. It makes this part of a destination. You can go there. You can walk through the park. You can go to the Tribute Park. You can go through the Cultural Center. There's all of those things.
Maritime Museum is
right across the street.
So
the Boyer.
It's all the things that parts of downtown have espoused to, kind of like the Hensville area.
That's right.
That's what you're trying to develop here, and at the same time, preserve this heritage, be educational, let people remember what the city was like back then, and the people that built the city, basically.
And people are beginning to hear more and more about it. See, I received a couple of donations in memory of. We always see that in the obituaries. You can leave donations to this organization or that, and people are now leaving in memory of, whether a parent or a friend, monies to the Polish Cultural Center in memory of, and then we contact the family that sends us the donation. You know, $5 is $5. It doesn't have to be $20,000, you know. But we'll take that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, or more.
Or more.
Yeah. But now, is there a timeline? I mean, is there a goal where you think you want to be at this point? I mean, where you want to be building at a certain time, or I mean, I know you're. It's on the path.
Sure. No, it's we've set really we've always had it. The timeline, the calendar, that would it be? It's a 5 to 8 year project. Boy, would I like to have it in 1 year to 2 years, but reality is such. So we're spot on in terms of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. The unfortunate part of getting this from scratch is we have a lot of polls, and as you pointed out earlier, they are dispersed not just within Ohio, not just within Northwest Ohio, but throughout the country. So it's bringing some of these folks back and mentally, maybe even spiritually, to say, yes, my heart is in there. That was one of the reasons we started the Polish Hall of Fame last year. And one of the categories is family and work and faith. And so that's getting the Polish people excited about this effort. We would always like to have it moved further along, but we're spot on in terms of where we want to get this. So we would love to groundbreak this year if we could, but we've got to make sure we've got X number of dollars.
And you never know, Steve. Some person listening to this, who knows, and they say, you know what, I got an extra $1 million.
Yeah. Why not?
The next thing, you know, I look at, you know, we do have people that make an awful lot of money, you know, and they'll say, yeah, I think that's a good cause, you know, and so you never know, and if that happens, Tom and I will be out there with a shovel.
Things can move up a little faster.
Next week.
Well, we wish you well on this project because it obviously has a lot of great aspects, not just for the Polish community, but the entire region, the city, everything.
And all ethnicities.
Pulls it all together.
And all ethnicities, because it's open to everybody.
Exactly. So Tom Waniewski, Tom Sorosiak. Again, where should they, what's the easiest place to find you?
PolishCulturalCenter.org.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll check back when you get ready to groundbreak. Let us know.
You'll be there, Steve.
Okay, I'll be there with a shovel.
That's for sure.
Thank you much for watching us tonight, and you can check us out at WBGU.org, and of course, you can find us every week here on WBGU-TV Public Television. We'll see you again next time.